You can see how this gets him to rotate his pelvis under, which is the same engagement that I want from him when I'm doing a piaffe or a pirouette. Everyone, I'm Amelia. Today I'm going to give you 3, maybe 4 exercises that you can do to work on engaging your horse's hind end. Stick around to the end also because I have a really cool trick that you can do before you get on in the cross ties to work on this. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you get notified when I post a new video every single Wednesday. Getting your horse to engage and use their hind end is one of kind of the most important things about riding and training dressage. The reason that it's so important is that when your horse engages their hind end, not only can you do really cool movements like pirouettes and piaffe and passage, but it also makes your horse a lot more maneuverable and easy to ride. So when their hind end is under them, your horse kind of feels like a race car and very powerful and maneuverable, as opposed to if your horse's hind end is like dragging behind them out in Texas, they don't really carry you. It's hard to turn, it's hard to do transitions, and all of that. So we're gonna get started here on Leo today. I haven't warmed him up at all, but the first thing that I think about when I think about engaging his hind end is his tempo. So what you'll see with him is that, and this is very, very normal for him, when I pick up the trot to start out with, his hind end is not very engaged. So I'm just gonna pick up the trot here and let him do what he wants to do. So this is kind of what he wants to do. He kind of starts out in this slow trot and his hind legs are just kind of dragging behind him. They're not really engaged at all. So the first thing that you want to assess to get your horse better engaged is their tempo. If your horse is on the lazy side, you're probably going to want to make the tempo a little bit quicker. If your horse is on the hot side, you're going to want to make the tempo a little slower. So with him, I wouldn't describe him as lazy, but at the beginning, he starts out kind of slow. If I just let him go like super slow, see how slow, and I'm going to exaggerate. But if I'm just like barely trotting, you see how he starts like pulling in the front and his hind end is just not engaging at all. So I'm going to think about, okay, get a little contact, make the tempo a little bit quicker, and thinking about a little shoulder force. I'm putting a little right leg on and connecting him into the outside rein. Now, if you have a horse that's on the hotter side, or if you have like PREs, I think are really typical for this, but if your horse starts going too fast, then that's not a good thing either. So if I'm like running, if I just start letting him like run on the forehand, that now he's not engaging his hind end either. And you can hear he starts foraging, like his feet start clunking together, and that's not good. So my first tip for engaging the hind end is find that tempo where you feel like your horse is active, but they're not rushing. Think of a little bit of shoulder fore. And the same thing applies to the canter. Like, let me show you quick. If the canter is too slow, like, let me see if I can get him, if I get him to canter really slow, he trots. But if I just really canter so slow, he can't keep cantering because his hind end isn't engaged. So what I need to do is I need to think, okay, quicker, half halt, quicker, half halt, quicker, half halt, quicker, half halt. Good boy. So that I can get that hind end a bit more under him. And I think that's really important, that the first part of engagement is just getting activity and tempo in your horse's gait. Now, the second way to work on engaging the hind end, or the second thing that you need to consider, is your horse's frame. So the reason that your horse's frame is super important is because your horse's neck is connected to their back, and then that connects to their hind end. So if your horse is just above the bit and they're hollow and their head is up, their back is going to be down, and when their back is down, their hind legs are going to be out behind them. So you want to have your horse round enough so that their back lifts up. But you don't want your horse to be too low that they're on their forehand. So again, it's kind of the same thing as with the tempo, is you have to find, it's like Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold, it has to be just right. So I'm going to show you with him what happens.
Oops, there's been a glitch. Actually, I need a big favor. Please, over 58% of you are not subscribed to my channel. So click the button below that says subscribe, as well as hit the bell. It really helps me out. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. Thanks, you guys.
If he's above the contact, so if I trot around and he's not on the bit at all, you can see that I don't really have any connection to the hind end, and his hind legs are just kind of, you know, dangling out behind him. Now, if you put your horse too low, so if I ask him to like go really, really on the forehand, too low, like that, then that's not good either. So you have to find a frame. Like with him, I feel like, let me see if I can find that frame. And the frame and the contact, the way that that feels has a lot to do with the engagement. So with this guy, when he's not engaged behind, you'll see him kind of tug on my hands and not really want to be soft and supple in the contact. So inside leg to outside rein. Good boy. This, I would say, is the frame that I want for engaging his hind end. Okay, so we've got tempo, we've got frame. Now the next thing to work on engagement are transitions. He's so ready to do those transitions. So the reason that the transitions help with engaging the hind end is because every time you ride a transition, your horse has to come through and come under. And now I'm still thinking about the tempo and the frame. So in addition to the tempo and to the frame, now you're adding in transitions. Transition to trot, tempo, contact, tempo. Activate that inner hind leg. I give him a little tickle behind there. Half halt. Ooh, that was exciting. But there I asked a little harder than he liked, which is okay. He overreacted. I'm just going to go with it, and then I'm going to repeat it again. The reason that he overreacted, because I was really activating that hind leg and saying, come on, because what I want with these trot to canter transitions is I want that first stride of canter really comes through from the hind leg. I'm gonna ride him a little forward. Boy. So, you know, I think when we think of engagement and using the hind end, a lot of times all we think about is piaffe and pirouette and that kind of thing. But it's important to realize that even in the warm-up, you're working on those things. So I'm trotting, 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 canter, 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 forward, forward, boy. Focusing on the frame and the tempo. Now I'm going to change direction and do the same thing to the right. Tempo, contact, half halt, canter. I didn't love that transition because he didn't come through behind the first stride. It was kind of like there was one half trot, half canter step in there. It was not through from behind. He was not engaged behind. So now in the canter, I'm thinking jumping, half halt, jumping, half halt. I'm trying to get that engagement in the canter. Trot, 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 trot. Wait. He's got to let me ask. Sometimes he starts anticipating. Half halt, canter, canter, canter. Good boy. That was good. Honestly, you cannot do too many transitions with your horse. Trot, 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 trot. Getting into that rhythm, focusing on the frame. Like, I'm putting him in shoulder in and he wants to dive down. He wants to slow down. There. Good. Good. Boy. Half halt. Good boy. And also managing the frame and the contact through those transitions. Oh. If you're not ready for trot canter trot transitions, you can also do trot walk trot transitions. That's another great way to do it. Good boy. But so those are the three things I would start with: tempo, frame, and transitions. Of course, eventually you can start to make the transitions a little bit harder. The other thing that's really important is your seat position while you're working on this, because if you're tipping forward, it's going to put your weight on your horse's forehand. And I know a lot of people have this tendency. So you really want to think about your seat bones pointing down into the saddle, keeping your belly button pulled to your spine. And like, you have to engage your core and your pelvis if you want your horse to engage their hind end. So that's really important to focus on your position as you work on engaging your horse's hind end. Let me know in the comments if you thought this was helpful, and I'm going to show you a little trick that you can do on the ground also to work on engaging your horse's hind end and to see what actually happens when they do engage their hind end. All right, as promised, I wanted to show you guys a little visual for what horses do when they engage their back, and you can do this from the ground also before you get on. It can be a good way to get your horse to engage their back and engage their core. It's kind of that feeling like when your horse has to go poo and they lift their back up. That's kind of the feeling of when their back engages. So one thing that you can do is you can just take your fingers, start up between his front legs, and I'm just scratching, and you see how high his back can actually lift. Like, he can really lift up his back. So that's basically what you want when you're riding, is you want them to lift up their back. And then when their back is lifted up, then their hind end can engage. So I would recommend doing it from the side. You can also do it from behind, and you can get a little bit more the hind end to engage, but you want to be really, really careful that you know your horse and that you don't get kicked. With a lot of horses, if you just kind of scratch them back here at the top of the tail, they'll lift their back up. With him, I needed to get a little bit of a hoof pick and do it a little bit harder. But you can see how this gets him to rotate his pelvis under, which is the same engagement that I want from him when I'm doing a piaffe or a pirouette. So I'll show you again from the side here, is you can just go under here and scratch a little bit and see how he lifts his back up when I do that. Or you can go from behind, but again, be super careful that you don't get kicked when you do this. Oh boy, boy. So that's something you can do before you get on, just to kind of activate the core muscles and get your horse to engage their hind end.